So, standing here, 2024, I'm kind of conscious this has been almost 20 years since I graduated from university myself, and then went away to work in games for a bit. And then it's been about 15 years since I started teaching in higher education part-time. And it doesn't really feel that long to me at all. By the time I've seen like many colleagues who've come through their own degrees and then gone on to kind of join us here at Abertay. And of course I've seen many more graduates in that time who've gone on to join the games industry. Not only that, but also to kind of drive innovation and growth in the industry themselves by forming their own companies. And some of you are here tonight. I'm really glad to see you. So we know there's a lot of fanfare about the success of games as a subject here at Abertay. We've talked about this a lot, and perhaps rightly so. We had our first named degree in games in 1997, and in recent years we've had lots of success in things like the Princeton Review, which is kind of reviewed us as being kind of internationally excellent. I think we are a very successful games university, and I hope that's been to the benefit of people who are here now studying, but also those who've graduated and gone off to work. And of course the industry that we partner with so frequently. But of course this is a position we don't want to just rest on. It's a position we'd like to bolster and to continue on being the place to go to study and to do games long into the future. I think this is something at the premise of tonight's talk, a reflection on what it's taken to be successful in these areas and how we continue to do this as the world of education, the world of games, and frankly the world as a whole is changing under our feet. So my takeaway from this will be, it won't be possible to achieve this level of success in the future if we only do what we've always done. So, however, we're here in person, and some of you are online, talking frankly. I've been afforded something of a platform to profess, if you will. I'll come back to that in a moment because it sounds absurd to me. I'd like to take this opportunity to state that really the numbers are not the story about our success. The story is much richer and more qualitative. And the success here in games at Abertay and in Dundee prior to the foundation of our games degrees is one based on people, on community, on personal curiosity and aspiration, on striving to achieve really great things from relatively humble and diverse and frequently working class backgrounds, to punch above our weight, not only in economic terms, and that we here are quite a small university with limited resources, but also above our weight in societal terms, in that we here in Dundee are really on the fringes, away from the Scottish Central Belt, away from the areas of Scotland that typically have the most resources, privilege, and of course distant from the main centres of innovation in the UK. So in that context, I think the real story of success in games in Dundee, to which I humbly suggest Abertay has played a part over the past 25 years, is about transformation and provision of opportunity, of providing ways for local people to enrol in university on a vocationally leaning degree that provides a route to social mobility, whether they've stayed here in Dundee or found themselves around the UK in the big gaming centres in the West Midlands or the South East, or indeed if they've gone overseas to Sweden, the Netherlands, Canada or California, so many places that our graduates now call home. And at the same time, our reputation has broadened the appeal of Dundee as a city to go to study games, and it's brought in many more students and colleagues from around the UK, from around Europe and internationally. And this international diversity has only enhanced the culture of games education here in Abertay and in the city as a whole. So really, as I'm trying to stress here, the success of games here at Abertay is about the people, the close-knit community of graduates who have since spread out from Dundee to San Francisco, but who remain connected to each other and to us. So, there's going to be a bit about my kids, because there always is. On the idea of social mobility then, I want to return to the matter at hand and say it is a really good privilege to be given the second professorial lecture of this new relaunched series of public talks, the Abstract 45 series. And as Jim pointed out, I was just promoted to professor last year, Professor of Game Design and Culture in the autumn. And I've kind of stressed this already, but the first thing that springs to mind when I say that is that sounds very absurd to me. Okay, I mean, I grew up in a very deprived area of Fife. I had aspirations of making games and making art from quite a young age, but I didn't really plan on going to any university. A lot of it was accidental. And even today, I still probably primarily see myself as a dad from just down the road. albeit one who frequently uses games to kind of cope with that reality, shall we say, and parody the experience. I'm very lucky to be in a position where I can use games as a mode of expression, to critique systems and interactions within society, even when those systems may be as innocuous as trying to get a curious little girl down to Breakfast Club before I miss my train. And I've seen you in the room, Alex. I was reminded of our graduation, and Professor Alex Law, who's somewhere in the darkness, gave a really, really good introduction to our honorary graduate, Darren McGarvey, to award him with an honorary degree. And once Darren was up on the stage after Alex's oration, which was fantastic, he had a chance to speak himself. He was quick to point out how very strange all of this is, and I totally empathise. I think universities can, and kind of bluntly are, still very strange institutions to those on the outside looking in, and walking into university was definitely something of a leap of faith on my part. Hence the absurdity of tonight. So however, I think we do a really, really, really good job here at Abertay of creating a welcoming and inclusive environment, and I think I felt that myself when I came here, I think first in 2000, when I was entertaining other options for me, and I was kind of sold on the idea of a degree. At the time, I saw a really wonderful power in games for change, which was a term that didn't really exist at that time, but did emerge over the coming years. And I found an environment here at Abertay in which that ideal would be supported. So I can honestly say that Abertay has been quite transformational for me, taking my passion for games and arts, allowing me to teach and to practice in these areas, to take part in creative game jams, occasionally alongside the ones who are going to surpass me in probably the next year. They'll be better than me. If anyone knows how to use Roblox, like as a developer, if you could teach my wee boy, that'd be great, because I can't do it. So in my new role, I hope I can be something of an advocate for that sort of genuine inclusion and diversity that I think helped me. And as a professor of game design culture, to me that's very much about trying to help promote the idea of university to communities, especially our local communities, and demographics who may feel kind of disconnected from education, to help guide those who are disadvantaged, find the confidence to attend and then achieve their degrees. And above all, to help those without a voice find a way to be heard. And I think games, as I'm coming to, is certainly a vehicle for that. So, very sorry, it's taken a lot of time to get to the start. So here we are. This is what we're actually talking about. The title of this talk is Active Process, and I think that succinctly describes my approach to teaching game making, as well as the reality of game design itself. But I think the story of learning, of teaching, of strong game degree programs is quite well known. So tonight, I'll be focusing on the success in games and arts research. Now, given what I've just been saying for the last 5 minutes and explain where I'm coming from, I can understand that might seem like something like a disconnect. I think the idea that research goes on in universities, I think that's fairly well understood, but often, and I certainly felt this from the outside looking in, universities may typically be thought of as places of public learning. And perhaps the impression then is that research is synonymous with science and innovation, less so something like games and art. And maybe even in that case, it's the reserve of perhaps the more prestigious or research-intensive universities that we might think of. When it comes to a vocation such as game design practice, surely the focus for a university should be on the classroom and not the research lab. Well, to make my position perfectly clear, research is part of what defines every university. And more than this, research, for me certainly, is not distinct from teaching in higher education. It's not a thing that happens on the side, although I empathise. Many academics in the room that say it absolutely does when they're trying to do everything else, but that's not the intention. No. Research and teaching in higher education, for me, are in fact exactly the same thing. So in its simplest terms, research is just a form of independent learning. That's all we really are doing when we do research. The identification of problems to solve, ideas to explore, the defining of projects to address these, the carrying out the work, and the sharing of the knowledge gleaned. And this is what we do in our games degrees as well as our degrees here at Abertay. This is what we do with our students. We ask that of them in their own learning throughout their degree programs all the way up to honours and beyond. And it's a skill set that should carry them forward to make enhanced contributions as games professionals. A capacity to identify challenges, problem solve, take the initiative, develop solutions and innovate. I think in the games industry in 2024, there's a lot of issues to solve. And so the story I'll tell you now about the success in research in games and arts at Abertay, it's the less well-known story, I think, compared with the one about teaching and learning. It's one about our games lecturers, some of whom are sitting in the dark. Unless you've left. Are you still there? Good. Excellent. And the quality of learning or research that they do and they carry out, and its international recognition. And for me, at least, how that is what will drive forward the quality of education going forward. I'll leave it on a white screen while I take a drink and watch for the anticipation of what's coming next. An opportunity to rant again. Universities as institutions, academia as a sector. I think in the various strands of government, we have a shared passion for acronyms. We really love acronyms. A good acronym's always fun. And they're often very absurd too. There's a lot of absurdity. And so I'm afraid I have to pivot to an acronym, but it'll be in passing. Okay. And the acronym is REF, Research Excellence Framework. For those of you in the room that have had a reaction, you know what it is. For the rest of you, don't worry, you'll forget what this is in 5 minutes. You won't worry about it ever again. Okay. So the Research Excellence Framework, or REF, is the UK's process for assessing the overall quality of research that takes place within universities in the UK. Assessments take place every X years. It's a fluid number, as we all know all too well, but typically 5 to 7 or 8 years. And the last assessment for us took place 2021. So there's a lot of nuance and complexity inherent with REF, which I really don't want to go into. I could if I wanted to, but it's not. I don't think you want me to do that. So I won't do that. I won't focus on it any more than I already have. Instead, what I really want to do is draw attention to the big picture of what this is about as far as our creative games research is concerned. Here's a graph, which I'll explain. So lecturers at Abertay, who were conducting creative research in games and arts, were submitted as part of Abertay's first ever REF submission to a unit of assessment, which has also got an abbreviation, but I won't bore you with that. Art and design. Our first ever submission, and actually 48% of those submissions were assessed as being internationally excellent. And even more so, 24%, so a quarter of all the work that was being done by the lecturers that you see in class was being assessed as being world leading. That's what that means, to help you see the graph. Okay. So by research outputs, what do I mean? That seems quite technocratic. What we do mean is, things like academic papers, conference papers, journal papers, that kind of thing, books, or monographs, the things you might expect that kind of academics do. But also as an art and design subject, a significant proportion of these outputs were actually creative outputs. They were digital games, alternative controller games, immersive experiences, installations, performances. So yes, the researchers that you can see in the classrooms, they directed, collaborated on, and exhibited games. And that was the output of the research activity. That's what was assessed at this level. Another graph. When it comes to research impact, and again, there's a way that I can explain this, the real world. Where does the value of university have? What is the value beyond the kind of classroom, beyond the university into the real world? The impact, the story was the same. We submitted 2 case studies about the impact of our lecturers at Abertay, both linked to games in this subject, and they were also assessed within this system of being internationally excellent and world leading. So now this is a really good story, I think. It certainly was at the time. It was lovely to look at that graph. But really it's a reflection of the quality and hard work of our great colleagues here at Abertay. But let's remember what I said earlier, and universities, research and teaching are not completely distinct concepts. This really good story is important because research and teaching are inherently linked. Research and teaching are both about knowledge. The former informs and enhances the latter. They're carried out by the same people, and I think often this can be overlooked in the noise. So when we are assessed at the national level as being internationally excellent or indeed world leading in research and art design, what we really mean is that the lecturers who are involved in teaching game design, game creation, game art, animation, interactive sound and music, or game studies, the faces you see in those classrooms on the games degrees are producing knowledge in the field that is world leading. So what do I mean by games research at Abertay? Well, I have to put some caveats in place just to explain what I'm talking about. So firstly, when looking at the quality of our art and design assessment, I want to kind of stress and highlight that this was a truly diverse subject for us. There was a lot of different things going on here. And games research was a major part of it, but the submission also included very many high-quality outputs in areas such as games and media studies, human-computer interaction, digital art. And my concern for tonight is just to kind of focus on those people who were doing practice-based art, so hopefully nobody feels left out. So secondly, also, I want to say focuses on art and design-driven practice research. And by that I mean I'm also technically excluding tonight all the really excellent technical and technology-driven research that goes on in games at Abertay, which is not within the remit of the story I'm going to tell. And that's all really important, because you might have seen in the news the award of, for instance, Co-Star within Abertay, that network, is a really big deal for us as a university and as a city, of course. But I'm not going to talk into that space of technical or technology or screen-based technologies. I'm talking about the practice art-based research just now. And thirdly, hopefully this is coming across, I'm really here to share with you some of the excellent work being produced by colleagues. Okay, so I really want to kind of speak to the quality of their work. I think sometimes we're not very good at shouting about ourselves, so I'm going to do it at them. And I will talk a little bit about the stuff that I've been in, mostly to kind of draw attention to how good other people's work is by comparison. So I'll have to put that in there. So for the absence of all doubt, the success of our research, those scores, it's all about the quality of thinking and work being delivered by our colleagues, and it's absolutely a collective endeavour. So what did games research by Abertay academics look like in the last ref, that really good submission? And what does that actually mean? I'm going to share a few examples before we move on, so it's time to start naming people. And the first one I've brought up is by my colleague Joseph Delap, who's a professor of tactical games and media. And he also led one of our impact case studies that was so well received. His practices in areas such as games art and activism, and it was a really important part of the portfolio of research that went in. So around about the time that Joseph joined us was 2016. He was collaborating with Biome Collective locally on the interactive installation Killbox, which toured internationally and was also very well received. But something I've decided to pick on here to kind of show an example of what was in that graph was Elegy. And Elegy was a mod that he directed alongside other colleagues at Biome Collective of Grand Theft Auto 5, and it was a form of game activism. So each day in Elegy, it reenacted the total gun homicides for 1 year, from July 4th, 2018 to July 4th, 2019. And gun homicide data was being live scraped from the gun violence archive and fed algorithmically directly into the project. So essentially it was a visualization of that live data. And really worryingly, on July the 4th, 2018, when it launched, there had been at that point 7,293 gun homicides in America. By the end of 2018, that had doubled to 14,730. So this project, I think, by Joseph is a striking example of the ways that games, modifications, and games art can be used as an example of engagement with audiences and raising awareness of social activism and critique as an artist. This is going to play. It is playing, but it's very dark. This is my colleague, Dr. Christos Mikalakos, who is in the dark, which I think he likes that. He likes to be in the dark. This was the most lit part of the video that I selected. You can just about see his drum kit at the bottom. So he's a senior lecturer in game audio, and he submitted a performance piece, Pathfinder, for our REF 2021 submission. It's an audio-visual performance game for solo drummer exploring the synergies between multiple contemporary creative practices. And the work used a bespoke augmented drum kit as a game controller, which was then used in the live performance alongside live electronics, lights, projections, and the drum kit, all combining to create the performance games universe, within which the performer has to explore, adapt, and navigate. Effectively, he was navigating a virtual world through his interaction with the drum kit. So Pathfinder is an example of a project that had really quite creative and exploratory research questions around the expressivity of the instrumentalist performance practice, how improvisation, experimentation, and failure can be quantified and then rewarded in an open world musical game scenario. So really excellent work. Now I bring in the silly stuff that I do to try and have the comparison. So another submission that we had in the last ref was a game called Virtua Walker, which was a project I did a lot of collaborations with Paul, who's no longer with us, moved back into the games industry, and Dana, who is definitely here because I saw him come into the room. This experimental project was primarily concerned with the aesthetic experience of games and developed during the height of the drive for immersive experiences, if you like, 2017. Hence our focus on mobile VR. It was really a parody game, of which I like to make, of Game Boy era audio-visual aesthetics and kind of rose-tinted memories of gameplay, as well as a bit of a parody of the walking simulator genre. And Virtua Walker, to really drive home the silliness of it, I think it's nice silliness, was a custom-based controller where you actually had to walk barefoot on sand to drive the VR experience forward. It's the only way you can move. For me, all these projects kind of exemplify the diversity of making practices related to games and art, but just really a small sample. As I said, there's many more examples of our decade-long endeavour at Abertay to push games making by academics as research. And I say the last 10 years, that's on purpose. So while we've been involved in games teaching and research since the 1990s, since we founded as a university, tonight I'm just choosing to focus on the period since the establishment of the Abertay Game Lab, which fully formed for the first time in 2014. So until very recently, Abertay Game Lab was not really a physical lab at all. It's had a physical home in the past, and it does actually have one now again inside our Emergent Technology Centre, but that was never really the point. The point of Abertay Game Lab was to kind of form a collective of like-minded practitioners who wanted to explore how we could do practical experiments around games and play, and further our knowledge in game making. So it was established by a small group of us back in 2014, the aspiration to grow art, design, research and games, engage with knowledge exchange with industry, and ultimately to enhance the quality and diversity of teaching and learning in games by fostering a community where lecturers are actively engaging in continual practice in game art and design. And we're getting onto the photos I warned people of were going to arrive of 10 years ago. So this on screen was one of our very first workshops, which took place during the inaugural Development Cultures project, which I should give a shout out at the university. It took a great leap of faith in us and gave us a very small budget, but it was sufficient for us to get this off the ground, which was quite innovative at the time. So Dana's visible. He's the only one looking at us on the camera there. But I thought it was really interesting to look at this photograph. Just trying to see if anyone's cringing. Yes, you're cringing, I can see it. So yeah, I'm visible in there, sort of, with my back to you, and so is Ryan. I did comment to Ryan earlier, Ryan Locke. Don't look quite so old and grey in that photo, much more full of life. But the thing that I wanted to point out was, actually, everyone else in that photo at the time was in the games industry. And yet, a minimum of 3 of you are not. We've now captured you, and now you're teaching here at Abertay. So it's really interesting to see that intersection between our Abertay Game Lab events and how that intersects industry and academia. More photos. So we engage with game making, games knowledge, not only through workshops and seminars, but also, as you may expect, through practice and game making. Indeed, one of our main ambitions was to instigate and grow our culture of game jamming as research in 2014, which connected industry, academics, and our student community. And I think game jams are very well established today. It doesn't necessarily appear that innovative on a university campus, but at the time it was still emerging. And I think colleagues such as Lynn Love, Ryan Locke, who were really good at organising and comparing game jams, did an excellent job in getting that off the ground for us. So this was the first major game jam that we had, which was called the Jump Jam, which is a jam predicated on the principle of, or the mechanic rather, of the jump, and that was the kind of provocation. But it followed another smaller jam around analog and digital interactions, so looking at custom controllers for games, which has become quite a big focus for us in the period since. So Development Cultures 2014, that was a launch pad, I think, for Abertay Game Lab, and anyone and everyone who wanted to become involved with making games as the focus for their research. In the coming years, through that grassroots approach to game making and inquiry, we would see 3 core themes in games research emerge, which I'll speak to through reference to some of the projects I've been involved in that time. Very pleased the audio didn't play. So again, working mainly with Dana Galloway, Paul Robertson. There we go. I found this a really exciting time. I would really like that one to play, but it doesn't want to. Oh, there we go. It was during this period that I've kind of developed my own interests in gaming history and nostalgia and critique of retro aesthetics, a lot of things that Jim kind of introduced at the beginning. And all these experimental games emerged through game jams, so 48-hour kind of creative exercises. Sometimes according to plan, if I'm honest, and more often not entirely chaotically, rather than going to any kind of plan at all. But it allowed us to kind of critique how game controllers worked, how the controller can be seen to complement or work in contrast to the screen representations. Virtual walkers appearing here again. I'll try and hit play on it. The reason I've included this is that it was something that emerged in a 48-hour jam, but ended up being something that went all the way through to a submission in the ref, which I talked about earlier, which I think is a good example of why this was an important activity for us. What started off as, yeah, like I said, a bit of a silly exercise initially in a jam, went on to tour around the world, from Wales to Denmark to California. We took that game all over the place. It was a very stressful time in California, finding it didn't work, and Paul being on a different continent and knowing how it worked. Okay, so alongside the experimental work, I was also involved in helping shape what our serious games research would be. And at the time, I was part of a Scotland-wide researcher programme called Scottish Crucible, which connected academics from around Scotland, different universities. And in my cohort of 30 academics, I was kind of the only artist designer there, but I made good friends with various academics, one in quantum mechanics at Heriot Watt, one in microplastics at University of West of Scotland, and cell biology at Dundee, just down the road, and shark immune systems, that's a discipline in Aberdeen. All great people. But together we devised a plan to explore how games could become the next area of media training for those kind of leading scientists. At the time, in 2015 onwards, kind of leading scientists did have access to training in things like broadcast, radio, media training, PR training, but not in games. So we kind of pitched this to Scottish Crucible as a way of thinking about games and play and interactivity as being something that scientists should have media literacy around. So we worked with teams of really, really talented Abertay students who've gone on to work in industry all around the world. And we shaped an agenda around popular science games, which were showcased at festivals and academic conferences. And that really, I think, helped pave the way at that time for what would become more of our applied games genre. And my daughter's appeared again there because she seems to test every game. She still talks about that game. She was really gutted to learn I don't have it anymore. And lastly, during this early phase of Abertay Game Lab activity, I was very lucky to be involved in a research project led by Professor Gregor White and funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, what's connected Abertay and the V&A Museum, which at that time was only the V&A in London. There wasn't a Dundee site. So that network facilitated discussions around the curation and presentation of games in museums. The initial network was based on a series of workshops in Dundee, London, and in California, and laid the foundation for that flurry of activity around games, curation, exhibitions. Off the back of that, we led on the development of a local games exhibition in 2016, which was a very successful Perth Museum Art Gallery. At the time, it became their most successful ever summer exhibition in terms of visitor numbers, demographic diversity, but also economically in terms of sales in the shop. So that was really good to see that that was bringing more people into the museum who didn't normally go there. But of course, on the bigger picture, this research fed into what did become the V&A's Design, Play, Disrupt exhibition, which ran in London before it came to Dundee when the V&A opened here. So from 2014 then, Abertay Game Lab very quickly gathered momentum around these kind of activities and these kind of broad thematic areas. Experimental games that focus on innovation and creativity in game mechanics, aesthetics and controllers, and applied games in the design and production of games and interactive media for application beyond entertainment. So in education, in historical representations, and in awareness raising. And games playing culture, so all our engagements with museums, galleries, festivals, of course game jams, other forms of public engagement and discourse around games and play. So with these themes in mind, I'd like to now go back to embarrassing colleagues who are sitting in the dark by giving examples of their work across the school, how it ties into these, and I kind of hope I can make clear why this research now is so vital to the quality of learning about games and game development here at Abertay. Great. So from 2014 to 2020, Dr. Lynn Love, senior lecturer here in the school, working with collaborators both internally and external to the university, led the vision for an original portfolio of play interventions. And these digital and analog game works sought to prompt connections between people through the shared experience of play. Each contribution interrogates the application of social play design strategies within set design constraints such as accessibility, participation and setting. Now, Lynn's work made a significant contribution to knowledge by demonstrating that play in its many forms has social benefits. whilst also mapping out audience and site-specific design strategies that can be applied by other practitioners in the field. So Lynn's work during this period for me is an exemplar of what we mean by experimental games research, and it was a pivotal contribution to our success in that art and design ref submission that I talked about. But of course, it's not only an extensive research portfolio. By leading the vision for a range of highly experimental social games, Lynn developed through her own design practice a knowledge of how to design for play in public spaces. And that knowledge, supported by her accessible game examples that we can access and look at, can be carried forward into the classroom and to student projects. So I'm going to skip forward from the past ref to what might come next, what kind of things might be in the current ref. And that's because I want to platform Sandy's work, who is looking very bashful in the front row, because I know you would. I'm glad you're sitting in the light. And this project's The Longest Walk. Sandy Tarbutt's a lecturer in game design. He's also researching for his PhD. Balancing the two of those things, to me, seems very difficult. But he's currently wrapping up his PhD. Yeah? Yep, good. And his work's examining biographical games in the context of personal health stories. The Longest Walk is a deeply personal biographical walking simulator about the experience of living with depression. The game was created using the audio recorded from a 54-minute long interview that he conducted with his dad, which was then edited into this approximately 9.5-minute long playable experience. And the aim of The Longest Walk is to help reduce feelings of isolation and encourage those who are struggling with depression to kind of reach out for help. I think through the sharing of the personal experience in an open and frank manner, this documentary game aims to provide an insight into what it's like to live with depression, to provoke discussion and help tackle the stigma about opening up about mental health issues. Within the wider context of Abertay Game Lab research, The Longest Walk, I think, epitomises that applied games theme, where original game making seeks to explore, address, or raise awareness of real issues. But to that, I want to add applied games are not just set in serious educational context out with the mainstream. I would kind of hope the fact that Sandy has been nominated for a Scottish BAFTA and has won prizes for his research on The Longest Walk at Taiga and Scottish Games Week. To me, I think that demonstrates that by applied games, we do mean games that have currency and value within the industry that we partner with the audiences that we want to engage, and maybe not a narrow view of what applied games could mean. And of course, for me, this is how we better enhance our curriculum in games. I mean, what better way to do that than to have an award-winning, BAFTA-nominated game designer in your classroom? So within the wider theme of games playing culture, the third of those themes I talked about, I want to highlight practice by Dr. Mona Bosdog, which was also submitted as part of the Art and Design Ref Assessment 2021. So Mona was drawing from her inspiration from theatre, from live performance, digital and analogue games, and she had two major practice contributions that were included in those ref numbers. The first was Inchcombe Project, which is within here, a hybrid experience that developed new ways of designing for the moving body across media by combining the aesthetics and design methods from contemporary performance practice and video games. Taking place on Inchcombe Island in the 1st of 4th in 2016, Inchcombe was experienced in 3 parts. A promenade performance adapted from the Chinese room game, Dear Esther, a gameplay projection of Dear Esther, and a live musical performance. Our second project, Generation ZXX, was a hybrid live and hybrid of live and virtual components, rather. An audio walk, a social play session. There were 3 video games developed and played in a pop-up arcade, a film projection, and a musical performance. And the project engaged with the living memory and heritage of the Timex factory in Dundee. And its aim was to reclaim and rewrite the official history of games here in Dundee. The project explored the hidden figures of the video games industry, the women who assembled the ZX Spectrum computers. Anyone remember ZX Spectrum? Yeah, cheer out for that. That woo gets smaller and smaller. It really worries me. I would shout the loudest for that. And the ramifications that this labour had for the city's development as one of the UK's leading game development education centres. So our practice-based research at Abertay tended to fall within these 3 exploratory themes, ways of kind of guiding what we do. But I want to come back to this idea that research and teaching are one and the same thing. The quality of research being developed by Abertay's game-making academics goes beyond the notion that these are the very same people just teaching the classes. While this is important, I also want to stress that the Abertay Game Lab work of the last and current REF cycles has allowed us to engage and connect stakeholder groups that are hugely beneficial to the quality of education happening on site. That's bringing in communities, the public sector and the third sector, bringing in industry, who we partner with so well, I hope, and of course bringing in the students themselves as the key beneficiaries of these relationships that we build. And to that, I want to kind of give an example of a really lovely story of the last year, which was a student project that was a response to a brief that came in from the Tayside Dynamo's Perchill Football Club. This relationship and research challenge was led by Dana, Dr. Dana Galloway, and Dr. Andrew Reid. I think for me it's an exemplar of how a game design challenge that can connect communities to students can be a focus for good and for learning. So Tayside Dynamo celebrate their 10-year anniversary in 2023, and Perchill football is the fastest growing disability sport in the UK. The sport is generally played by individuals who require the use of a powered wheelchair for mobility, but it's open to all disabled individuals, specifically tailored to those with some of the highest impairments. Perchill football is based on the mainstream game of football and is played on a basketball-sized indoor pitch with 4 players aside. Tayside Dynamo has really wanted to work with Abertay to explore how a Perchill football computer game could be accessible to people with a range of disabilities. Bringing in this external relationship and this research challenge into the curriculum not only connected game design innovation to the student experience, but also helped to platform the excellent work that our students do when they are working on these innovative problems. And they were recognised for that work with an award at the International Serious Play Awards. I think we do, this is one example, but I do think we have a strong track record of trying to bring in these opportunities through our research, through collectives like Abertay Game Lab to bring benefits to students in terms of engagement with communities, the public sector and the third sector, but also in terms of connections with industry. So in terms of Abertay Game Lab research that is intersected with industry, in the forms of creative collaborations and innovation, I can give many examples, but I'm going to draw on one which is just it's actually completed today. I didn't think about this, about the timing, but it has finished as of today, is the last day of the project. Our Arts and Humanities Research Council project in Game International, which was a creative collaboration between universities, looking at the intersection between the UK and China industries and audiences and cultures. Very challenging project to do when there's a global pandemic. So I've learned a lot about how to do that. So working with Beano Studios, Outplay Entertainment and also Pocket Size Hands, I know Gary is here, so hi Gary. We produced a range of original high concepts and playable vertical slices. Through game design discussions, practical experimentation, this work explores topics as diverse as how do you bring an iconic British IP, like characters from the Beano, to a Chinese audience. Addressing things like how do we bring UK insight and knowledge and know-how around mobile game development and have that align with market expectations and trends in China. And also, perhaps most interestingly, how do you integrate localization, culturalization, cultural difference into the design process? So as with our applied games research connecting communities, the third in the public sectors, to game design practice with the students, Abertay Game Lab industry links are an additional channel for our creative research. And in both instances, what we see is how games research led by staff directly intersects with and supports the learning about game design and production that we're asking our students to engage with. So with that, I don't know how my time is, but I'm coming towards the last part now, Act 3. Of this chat, I want to discuss about a live project, which is what we've been working on. By we, I mean Mona and I, since September 2022, which seems longer than I thought. The reason I've selected this is, first, it's a collaborative design process that I've been personally involved in, so hopefully I can make transparent that design is hard, and I don't know what I'm doing either, but that's part of the journey. Yeah. And secondly, because it's a piece of practice-based games research that actually has roots in our teaching and our pedagogic practice. So as part of our co-delivery of a first-year game design module, and some of you are here, I saw your faces, you were there the last academic year, that's centred on game concept development, we set out to actively design our own game concepts in class alongside our students, to be doing it with them. And making transparent, as I said, our own lack of understanding about what to do. And calm disagreements with each other about what to do. how to work, how to do game design, how to problem solve, how to negotiate design decisions, and how this is actually quite a difficult process. So as I said, Right to Rome is a design project that started in our classroom. It's our own practice-based research as game makers, but it was also conceived and designed within the context of our practice as educators, so research and teaching, one and the same. What is Right to Rome? I actually have it here. If anybody wants to come and have a look at it, they can. It's an original tabletop board game that was designed in response to media coverage and personal stories of the risks women face when walking alone in public places. As you can see, the final game has been produced as a physical artifact that can be played. And that's what we're subsequently now using in our engagement activity, in festivals, and working with local communities. The concept for the game itself actually emerged from an aspiration Monad had for some time to explore this theme and this topic, challenging topic, through game making. And originally, I think the idea was to do this in a digital game, as a walking game. But in our discussions around this theme and this topic, we did think this is an opportunity to explore board games as perhaps the ideal medium, playable medium, to expose complex systematic injustices about walking. And did it. Yeah, definitely did that. You can't see what's happening on the screen right now, and I think that reflects reality of the fact I couldn't see where I was going either, and I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about this at all. Very early on in the creative process, the collaboration with Mona has really challenged me to examine the safety of public spaces, to learn myself about the diversity of the experience of those spaces, rethink how and where I walk. In addition to engaging with desk research, game design, playtesting, I found that walking was really an invaluable part of that creative process. These are all photographs I took of my town, walking where there are streetlights, allegedly. At the time, I was frequently walking along a burn through the woods in the pitch black with the torch on my watch. I hadn't really thought about it. Really interestingly, I hadn't actually ever asked my wife why she doesn't walk to the shop until Mona's made me think about it. And now I realised it's only me that leaves the house at night. And that's not really good, is it? So confronted with the reality of others' lived experience, I was now seeing like our own town in a very different way. So I took these photos of where we walked. A lot of these places I just don't go now. I hadn't really thought about it before. I think I shared a lot of these photos with Mona. Sorry for sending you like Discord prompts saying, look at this, what would you do? And then you just see a black photograph, it could have been anything. But yeah, I think this creative process was really important. What we have here is our final game board, which is also in front of me, and the representation of the different types of hand a player can draw. It's a 4-player game. So each of the 4 players starts in a corner of the board, either the pub, the gym, the library, or the hospital, all those drawn from real life stories. You draw players, you're allocated a player, you don't get to choose. And the objective is to walk home to the centre of the board. But which route should you take? Oh, it took a long time to get routes to work on this board game. I think they weren't now. Longer routes, they look relatively safe once you understand the mechanics. You know, there's chances for shortcuts, there's chances to get on a bus. But the darker routes are shorter, but the dark spaces can hold threats, dangers, real or perceived. Players take turns rolling the dice, which you'll not see, but I have them here, and the coin, to move across the board, and they can only win if everybody gets home. It's not a winner takes all game. The different coloured player pieces that you see determine which type of dice the player is allocated. A 6-sided dice or 10-sided dice. 10-sided dice gives you a higher probability of moving forward each turn. The player colour also determines whether you allocate the shortcut coin, which I'll come to, and also how many cards you start with at the beginning of the game. The concept was that the different player starting hands is to embed from the very start of the game into the game mechanics an inherent inequality. Differences in dice, coins, reflected different levels of confidence and security we may experience ourselves as we walk off home from a location in the dark. So here, for example, we can see how the game board has several shortcuts, such as the graveyard. Who would walk through a graveyard in the dark? I did. So yeah, that allowed players to skip ahead and make faster progress. But these shortcuts also reflect that kind of inherent inequity. Only 2 players begin with the shortcut coin, which they can toss to see if they can use the shortcut. The other 2 players don't have the shortcut coin, and so the shortcuts are simply just not an option for them. So in practice, what does this mean? I think if we projected ourselves into the game, then I would absolutely have the shortcut coin, and it would probably have go on both sides, because I wouldn't have thought about it. That would be me. For Mona, would you have had a shortcut coin? No, you would not. So it's not even something you would entertain. So there's not even the chance that you could possibly use that shortcut. We've also got bus stops in the game, which you use your regular dice to access. They provide an opportunity to skip ahead as well. So all players have a chance to use the bus, because of course we can all get on a bus. However, those players with the 10-sided dice still have a far greater chance of being confident enough to get on that bus. If that bus was full of rowdy football fans, as the example that Mona settled on, would you get on that bus, Mona? No? I might be one of those football fans. So yeah, differences are ingrained there. It was really important for us that we can explore the use of the buses and public transport in the game also to show that inequity. I was actually influenced by a story at the time in late 2022 that I think actually might have came from an official source, that if women were ever concerned about a lone police officer approaching them in the dark, they could just wave down a bus, and that was the way of fixing that. We kind of wanted to highlight the kind of absurdity and kind of insensitivity of that kind of advice, but also I think to highlight the fact that even public transport is unequal and does not necessarily help. We have cards in the game. They can take two forms, threat cards and guardian cards. So again, these cards were drawn from real-world stories, from news stories, but also from personal experience and from speaking to others to learn about how they encountered walking home. Threat cards are drawn when you land in a dark space, and that's why those dark spaces are dangerous. Every threat card has the potential to disrupt your walk home. There might be a false alarm, which is the first card you see. So there's nothing there. You're still concerned, but there's nothing there that's going to be a risk. There might be a potential threat that causes you to move back one space, or there might be a very real imminent threat, which causes you to walk back all the way to the last lit space. Think snakes and ladders. Kind of examples of those cards that are shown here. Again, things I'd never thought about. Weak orange streetlights. I don't know. That was just Scotland to me. I thought all of Scotland looked like that. But no, that could be threatening, right? Or it could be things a bit more dangerous, like hearing footsteps walking behind you in the dark. Guardian cards are your defense, with cards including torches, running shoes, keys clutched in your fist. And you can start with a set amount of these cards, but you can draw more during the game. If you land in certain very safe spaces, you can draw more in lieu of taking a turn. If you draw a threat card, if you've got the appropriate guardian card, you can dismiss that threat. So a system of inequality. The items you've got to take with you, the routes you've got to take. So again, these cards draw on real-world stories, as I said. Items or knowledge that make people feel more safe when they're walking alone. But one of the most important decisions, and I really credit Mona for this because I think it's a brilliant innovation, it's going to have a lot of impact, I think, was to do the customization of the game. It is a game that we can play, and I think actually in and of itself it can be quite, don't like using the word fun in the context of a game such as this, but there is a challenge inherent in it, and it plays very well, I think, now out of the box. But Mona's design vision for this being a customizable game is, I think, brilliant, and I think that's where the research impact's going to come from. You play in the standard mode, existing cards, existing spaces, 15, 20-minute game often is what happens. Now, we have tested it, it does prompt discussion. It's interesting the things that people say when they're playing this game, especially if it's a kind of mixed group. But the custom mode is a mode that allows the players of the game to actually define their own spaces. They can define their own cards, what are the threats, what are the things that make you feel safe or secure. They can define what the shortcuts are they would never use, the spaces where they feel safest, even where they're starting. Where are you walking from? Where are you walking to? Why is that so important? Well, for me, this means that this custom mode can and has been used in our engagement activities. It will be more so over the coming months, because we've now got a game-based method for learning more from communities, different demographics, different types of people walking in the same spaces. What do they perceive as the problems of those spaces? There's a lot of scope there, I think, to kind of open up and talk about our communities. So, Right to Roam, which we're saying continue to work on, conduct research in terms of evaluation, as well as develop new versions, which is exciting because I like making things with partners. I think that could be an example of how game design research is taking place here in Abertay. Within the Aberdeen Game Lab themes, I think it actually touches on all of them. It's experimental, and it's really looking at game mechanics, game systems, and how they can be used to represent, imitate, critique real-world systems. It's applied, and it's actually seeking to reflect and raise awareness and hopefully have a degree of grassroots activism around their communities. And as I said, it's also an example of games as a cultural activity because we're taking it out to those communities, we're taking it out to festivals and working with community groups and charities to think about how we could potentially make it even better and give it to them as something they can take forward and use themselves. But to come back to my point, and I'm almost at the end, the quality of game research is synonymous with game teaching, is the kind of thrust of what I'm talking about tonight. Right to Rome is an example of game design research, game design practice, that's embedded within our game design teaching. The final game took a lot of design work, a lot of near giving up points. I think of this as just not going to balance properly. Very difficult to balance a game for imbalance, but that's a really good educational exercise, I think, for anyone who's looking to study game design. We had a lot of iteration, a lot of prototypes, which we're happy to share and preserve for you to look at. Prototyping, revisions, balancing and rebalancing mechanics, removal of mechanics, removal of certain spaces on the board I was very attached to. It was very hard to get rid of those spaces, but they're gone. Introduction of new mechanics, reflection on the visual design. I found a lot of comfort doing visual design. That's why I procrastinate. I just go back to being an artist and think, the game, Mona will fix it. I'll be all right. And narrative design. So from various paper prototypes through to production, this not only informs our game design teaching, but it's actually happening in class. So to wrap up, and come back to where I started and consider the title of tonight's talk as active process. In computing terms, an active process refers to when software is loaded into memory and it's actively running. So if you consider the running of quality education in games as a process, what are the core functions of that process? My argument today, and hopefully my takeaway for you, is that the active process of running a high quality education in games is predicated on game design practice actually taking place collaboratively, cooperatively, and not just within the classrooms and also in wider contexts involving our games lecturers as both educators and researchers. In a university degree setting, we must understand the importance of game design practice as both teaching and learning and as research and scholarship, as I said, one and the same. And that work should involve students and lecturers and industry and other stakeholders from the third sector, public sector, and other community groups working together to make, evaluate, and release games into the world. It's vitally important that we strengthen the connections between the quality of practice-based games research and the quality of our teaching and learning in games. In 20 years' time, will we stand here once again and reflect on our position as a successful games university with a track record of 45 years of world-leading education? When I wrote that, I didn't think about reading out 45 years. I feel very, very old now. In 45 years of a games education, will we still be a leader? Well, that might not be the case. Remember, the world is changing. Everything's changing rapidly. If we fail to connect research and teaching to see games educators not as classroom facilitators, but instead as active and continuing practitioners, as lifelong students themselves, whose research ensures that they are not only continuing to engage in the practice that they're tasked to teach, but also developing new works, new ideas, new outcomes, new games that are recognized internationally. I think for me, this is my argument, it's my platform, so I'll have it. Thank you very much. This is how to grow an inclusive community of games and arts peers. Where teacher and student, for me, really is just a question of perspective. I've learned so much from students, and I think we need to make sure that it is a peer relationship. We are doing this together. We're learning together. So I hope that this public lecture has helped shine a light on the work of my colleagues, which is really what I want to do, both completed and ongoing. It would be remiss of me if I did not point out that that's just a small selection. There was so much I could have pointed to from the last REF submission and stuff that I can see happening now that very well may be the next REF submission. It's really the type of an iceberg. So while I've given a taster of my colleagues and my own research, I'm keen to continue to find ways to help promote and share the work of our colleagues. Again, coming back to where I came from, I think that diversity, inclusion, being a welcoming university, I think that's really important. And I kind of hope that that's my role now going forward to help them find their voice. So thank you very much. And just as I close, I want to draw attention to their next Abstract 45 talk, which is on the 28th of February with Denise Martin. And that's me done. So thank you very much.